The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. I am so proud and grateful to our audience, as I always am, but especially last night, because they took this book last night. This is a 6-year-old book. This is Isabel Wilkerson's astonishing book, Caste, and they made it #1 on the Amazon bestseller list overnight, where it's been before, and I'm sure they made it #1 in some other booksellers around the country. But Isabel was here last night talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson's opinion in the birthright citizenship case, and doing so eloquently. Justice Jackson quoted this book and quoted Isabel Wilkerson in her opinion. So it was great to have her here. But what I really love about this is that kind of reaction in book sales tells you how our audiences are attached to what is happening in what we're able to present to them here with just the best possible guests on the subjects like this, like Isabel Wilkerson.
I mean, she is incredible, but I also think we learned, and I know this from going on your show with my book, you need a book club, because I think people who are loyal watchers of The Last Word want to read what you're reading, and that's another lesson too. So, but that's incredible. She's incredible, and hopefully it stays out there for a long time, up high on the list.
Yeah, it really deserves to be. President Obama has talked about this book. This is one of those books that will be with us and should be with us forever. And I'm so glad to see it back up on top on those bestseller lists.
Yeah, me too. It's a good sign for the country, I think, or where we are, I guess.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks. Cooperation ends today. It is time for him to pay. Those rhyming lines were aimed at Donald Trump, and they are from one of the many people Donald Trump hates. Today, as every Republican in Congress, in the House and in the Senate who is running for re-election cowers in fear of Donald Trump every single day of their lives, people who Donald Trump threatens, people who Donald Trump hates as much as he has ever hated anyone, continue to stand up to Donald Trump. And one of them is going to make him pay, and pay very soon. Former Special Prosecutor Jack Smith came to this network today to do the first interview he has ever done about his 2 federal criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump. Did that interview with Nicole Wallace here at 5 p.m. Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to imprison Jack Smith, and Jack Smith, who told Congress in public testimony that he developed proof that Donald Trump is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, said today there is nothing Donald Trump can say or do to intimidate him.
I am not going to be intimidated. And there's no way in the world, if the thought was to go after me so that I wouldn't speak up about the corruption that's happening or speak up to defend these agents and prosecutors, that is a grave miscalculation. There is no way I'm going to be intimidated.
And E. Jean Carroll, who is now 82 years old and who has beaten Donald Trump in court repeatedly in 2 different cases, is now telling Donald Trump it is time to pay up. E. Jean Carroll's most recent crushing of Donald Trump in court came when the United States Supreme Court unanimously rejected Donald Trump's appeal of the $5 million judgment that a federal jury awarded to E. Jean Carroll 3 years ago after finding Donald Trump, as the New York Times put it, quote, liable for sexually abusing and defaming Ms. Carroll. In order to pursue his appeal, Donald Trump had to put the $5 million in an escrow account controlled by the judge in the case. Both sides of the case, Donald Trump's lawyers and E. Jean Carroll's lawyers, at the time agreed that the money would have to be paid as soon as Donald Trump got to the end of the line of his appeals, which is, of course, the denial of a petition for the Supreme Court to hear the case. And that happened on Monday. And immediately, according to E. Jean Carroll's lawyers, Donald Trump's lawyers called E. Jean Carroll's lawyers to ask for an extension on paying the money that Donald Trump now owes E. Jean Carroll in that case. Attorney Roberta Kaplan, who has successfully represented E. Jean Carroll in this case at every stage, told the judge in writing, quote, defendant's counsel contacted Carroll's undersigned counsel to inquire whether Carroll would consent to a further stay of enforcement of the judgment in this action so that defendant can ask the Supreme Court to reconsider its denial. And yeah, I'm kind of laughing about that because the Supreme Court just doesn't reconsider their denials. I mean, theoretically, technically, it's possible, but it's way, way, way less than a 1% chance. E. Jean Carroll's lawyer had a one-word answer for the Trump lawyers, no. And then she immediately filed a motion with the judge saying, quote, the court should enforce the plain language of the existing stipulation and order and direct immediate disbursement of funds because the $5 million judgment gains interest every day that Donald Trump doesn't pay it. And it has been gaining that interest for 3 years now. The total that Donald Trump actually owes E. Jean Carroll as of Tuesday was $5,779,783, and it has gone up since then because it goes up every day that Donald Trump doesn't pay it. E. Jean Carroll's lawyer reminded the judge of all the delay tactics Donald Trump has used throughout this case over the years and quoted the judge himself as having said in the past that Donald Trump, quote, should not be permitted to run the clock out on a plaintiff's attempt to gain a remedy. E. Jean Carroll's lawyer ended her 9-page motion with these words, quote, to date, Carroll has agreed to each of defendant's many requests to delay the payment he owes her, given the extraordinary lengths he has taken to avoid such payments, and that each of those efforts has been denied in full. That cooperation ends today. It is time for him to pay. Carroll. The judge gave Donald Trump a deadline of next Tuesday, July 7th, to reply to that motion. It is at this point impossible to foresee any other outcome than the judge ordering Donald Trump to pay the now almost $5.8 million that he owes E. Jean Carroll within a matter of days, probably within this month of July. And so it's time's up for Donald Trump because E. Jean Carroll says it is. Time's up for Donald Trump because our judicial system was designed to allow a private citizen to have the same rights and powers in a courtroom that anyone else has, even if the other person in the case is currently the President of the United States. And that is why Donald Trump has tried to destroy that system. That is why Donald Trump has tried to poison the federal judiciary with incompetent federal judges like the one he appointed in Florida, whose place in history will be having disgraced herself by doing everything she possibly could to block Jack Smith's prosecution of Donald Trump for violations of the Espionage Act and the illegal possession of classified documents after Donald Trump left the presidency. That is why Donald Trump has poisoned the Justice Department by trying to fill it with people, including an FBI director, with no allegiance or expertise and no allegiance to anything or anyone other than Donald Trump. Donald Trump cannot survive in a federal criminal justice system that actually works. And so he's done everything he can to destroy it, not because of some political or philosophical belief, but entirely as a matter of self-protection. Protection from brave plaintiffs like E. Jean Carroll, who could not be intimidated by Donald Trump, and brave prosecutors like Jack Smith, who could not be intimidated by Donald Trump. Donald Trump can afford the $5.8 million that he owes E. Jean Carroll, and the federal judge handling the case knows that, because like all federal judges in New York City, he must read the New York Times, which has been delivering the best reporting on Donald Trump's profiting from the presidency. Eric Lipton, whose work at the New York Times now is dedicated to putting the financial dealings of the President of the United States under an investigative microscope, will join us in our coverage this hour. Donald Trump did an interview with CNBC today, the business news network, where he made it very, very clear that he does not care at all about the personal business of economic survival in this country for people who continue to worry about the cost of living and especially the affordability of housing.
In a few days, it's going to become law one way or the other, the housing bill, right? You're going to sign it? Will it become law? Where do you stand on that? Is it? I know you called it a...
He had nothing to say about it. Just went silent there. Nothing. And then, after dozens of rambling lines, including, quote, "Nobody knows more about housing than I do," Donald Trump returned to the housing bill, but still wouldn't say if he would sign it.
But the housing bill is fine. There's a lot of Democrat points in there that I don't even think are good, but it's fine. But I've made the case I'd rather not sign anything until we sign the Save America Act.
And that's it. That's everything he said about the cost of living and affordability in America, which is to say, nothing. He said nothing. As we have explained on this program before, if Donald Trump doesn't sign the bill, it will automatically become law after 10 days, unless he vetoes it. But saying the housing bill is fine is an indication that he is not going to veto it. But not signing it proves that he is not trying to rush help to Americans through a bill supported by most Democrats and most Republicans in Congress who are concerned about the affordability of housing. Joe Kernan gave Donald Trump a sort of predictable, perfectly reasonable question that most interviewers would give on the eve of a big American birthday like the 250th. And Donald Trump had no answer to a question that has been a welcomed softball for every president in history who has ever been asked this question, which is most of them. Do you have a favorite president?
Do you have a favorite president, or do you think there's a period that was so formative that if we lost our way in any respects?
We
do you
have.
think at this point?
We've had some very bad presidents. The president has got tremendous power in this country. Even before the decision that I got, Slaughter, they call it the Slaughter decision, which is an interesting name. But that's a very powerful decision. But it gave a lot more power to the president. But it has been a strong presidency, not just me. It's been a strong presidency. It's considered a strong office. You know, other presidents are not considered a strong office. Even if you're president, you can't do as much. But now with this additional, I mean, it's very special. We are respected again as a country, maybe like never before. A year and a half ago, we were laughed at. They're not laughing anymore. They respect us. The King of Saudi Arabia told me, and I said this numerous times. He said it, but many people said it. He said, President, a year and a half ago, America was dead. They thought it was dead. And right now, you have the hottest country anywhere in the world, and we do.
Well, let's hope for another 250 like that.
Thank you very much.
Do you have a favorite president? That was the question. And the answer is clearly no. Donald Trump was asked to think about someone else, and he just couldn't do it. He doesn't have it in him to think about someone else. Every elementary school student in America has an answer to that question. Do you have a favorite president? And Donald Trump doesn't. For Donald Trump, there is nothing Abraham Lincoln did that could make him Donald Trump's favorite president. Nothing Washington or Jefferson or either Roosevelt or Kennedy or Reagan. Donald Trump has spewed hatred for every living president. His very first line on the eve of the country's 250th birthday, when asked if he has a favorite president, his very first line was, quote, "We have had some very bad presidents." That is what this man, full of hate, said about the American presidency. That was the only thing he said. And he never said, we've had even one good president. And that's what you get from the 80-year-old mind of a man who treats the presidency as a side job while his thoughts remain locked on money, lies, and revenge. He's right. We've had some very bad presidents. And that is the category in presidential history where Donald Trump reigns supreme. He is the worst of the worst. Leading off our discussion tonight is Iowa State Representative Josh Turek. He is the Democratic candidate for United States Senate in Iowa. Josh, thank you very much for joining us again tonight. And I think the audience here knows that we're not rushing around the country trying to find every obscure candidate running in Republican territory who might have a chance. So I just want to brief the audience on the latest here in the polling in Iowa, which is a return to an Iowa that I'm old enough to remember, when Democrats could be elected to the United States Senate, like Senator Tom Harkin. And there it is. There it is. The Democrat, Josh Turek, 50 to 46 among registered voters. And then when you get to the people who are really going to rush to the polls, it opens up 56 to 41. And Josh, I don't like to use polls in our coverage of campaigns and what's happening and the issues, but this is one where I think people have to see this. And no matter what the outcome is in November, as of right now tonight, something really profound politically is happening in Iowa. Is it about Donald Trump?
Well, Lawrence, thanks for having me. It's good to be back with you, my friend. Yeah, I'll tell you this. Iowans are ready for change, and everywhere that we're going all across the state, we're getting a lot of Republicans and independents that are showing up to our events that are talking about they don't recognize the state or the country that they live in. I mean, Iowa, we are uniquely struggling. We are basically dead last for every economic metric, healthcare metric. We've closed 250 more healthcare clinics than we've opened in the last 15 years, only state with a growing cancer rate. And now because of the tariffs, leading the nation in farm foreclosures, Iowans are ready for change, and the winds of change are here.
I want to show an ad for your campaign that is, as people will recognize right away, unlike any ad maybe any of us have ever seen. That's all I'm going to say about it. Let's take a look at this.
Well, Josh, tell us, how'd you win that House seat when no one said that was possible?
The blueprint is hard work, grit, and determination. I went out every single day, crawling those stairs, knocking doors, dragging my wheelchair up, having face-to-face conversations with Republicans, with independents, with Democrats. It did not matter the party. The very first thing they would say is, how in the world did you get up here? And I would say, I crawled up here. I drug my wheelchair up here. That's how important it is to have a conversation with you.
Talk about red states and red districts and red Senate seats turning blue. Look no further than Iowa.
Josh, when I first became aware of your candidacy and understood your condition, I immediately thought of President Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who we all now know, spent his entire political career in a wheelchair, but he didn't want the public to know at the time, and it was pretty easy, relatively easy, to make that something people didn't know. He found ways of pretending to be able to stand up on his own when giving speeches. We've come an awful long way from that. And what has been throughout your career in Iowa, have people just ignored it the way it feels the appropriate way to regard it? It just doesn't seem like a real factor in dealing with you in any way, especially if you can climb up my stairs like that.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, honestly, when I would crawl the stairs, the first question they would always ask me is, how in the world did you get up here? And I would say, I crawled. That's how important your vote was to me. And in a 5-minute conversation, when people would learn about me, learn about what I'm fighting for, common sense, prairie populism, fighting for the people, not just for the billionaires and the large corporations, I would find over and over and over, a lot of Republicans would say, I'm not going to vote for every single Democrat, but I'm going to vote for you. And when earlier I heard you talking about, President Trump not being able to talk about his favorite president, I can tell you for me, one of my favorite presidents, without a doubt, is FDR. And I say that one of my political North Stars, my political philosophy, is a quote from FDR, which is, the test of our progress of a society is not whether we add more to those with abundance, but whether we have enough to those with the least.
Josh Turek, thank you very much for joining us again tonight. Please come back as the campaign progresses. Iowa is absolutely back in play, and depending on how you read that poll, you're either way ahead or just ahead. Thank you very much.
It is in play, and if people will help us, TurekForIowa.com, we can push for change here in Iowa.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. And coming up, New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Eric Lipton now has one of the most difficult assignments at the paper, following the money, the Trump money. Eric Lipton will join us next. In their important best-selling new book, Regime Change: Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump, New York Times reporters Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan write, there was so much capitulation, so much conquest, so much corruption, it became hard to follow. And that is exactly where Eric Lipton picks up the baton. Our next guest, Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton, is following the money in the Trump family businesses. Eric Lipton's byline is on 5 different stories just this week, and it's only Thursday. On Tuesday, Eric Lipton was part of the New York Times team reporting that, quote, President Trump reaped a stunning windfall in his first year back in the White House, including about $1.4 billion from his family's cryptocurrency businesses, a new filing shows. All told, the president pulled in at least $2.2 billion, a figure that includes other parts of his vast holdings, such as his real estate assets. That compares to a minimum of $622 million his enterprises pulled in for all of 2024 before he returned to the presidency. Yesterday, Eric Lipton and his colleagues at the Times reported the president's 927-page financial disclosure showed how Mr. Trump and his family reaped huge financial rewards in 2025 through his money-losing Trump Media venture and a separate cryptocurrency firm called World Liberty Financial, even as routine investors suffered vast losses. He also amassed hundreds of millions through deals that involved foreign governments or corporations with agenda items pending before the Trump administration. The week began with Eric Lipton and the investigative team breaking news on Sunday under the headline, Trump cut a $1 billion mining deal his sons stand to profit. An agreement between the U.S. and Kazakhstan has given a group of American investors with ties to the president and the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, access to one of the world's largest untapped reserves of tungsten. The Times reports the arrangement is hardly an outlier. Both of the families have financial ties to at least 14 companies that are actively working with the federal government and on critical mining deals, including the Kazakhstan project, according to federal filings examined by the New York Times. All 14 of these companies have either benefited directly from offers of financial assistance from the Trump administration or have pending permit applications before the Commerce Department, which Mr. Lutnick oversees. The Times found the total amount of federal funding that the Trump administration has provided or is considering providing to the companies exceeds $8.9 billion, according to public statements by the companies and federal government. In his interview with CNBC today, Donald Trump defended all of this way.
Well, I feel badly in a way for my kids because every time my kids do, if they invest in a stock or if they go and do a bill, anything they do, because the presidency is so powerful, so big, everything, if they buy a cupcake company, well, the energy to make the cupcakes is, sort of like, how's my energy policy? So therefore you have a conflict. Almost anything they do, if they want to buy a truck, if they want to buy, if they buy an energy efficient truck, they have inside information.
And joining us now is Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton. Eric, if there's anything in what Donald Trump just said that you want to respond to, that's fine. It's the usual mismatch of stuff that he's saying there. It doesn't seem to apply to anything. But the disclosure forms that you got, these federal disclosure forms, 900 pages, they're not as specific as people might imagine. They don't have, in some instances, they don't have very specific dollar items. They just have ranges of possibilities. How do you get a picture of the whole in looking at that?
A lot of them, when it comes to President Trump, do in fact have individual, specific dollar amounts of revenues that the Trump organization saw from different operations, be it Mar-a-Lago or the Doral Hotel or the World Liberty Financial or the meme coin. And then all these international deals involving, Saudi Arabia real estate company or in Vietnam, you can see the line items for each element of their business operations and see how much revenue, not necessarily profits, but revenue they made. So
we saw in Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's reporting a sense even from them, these dogged, attentive reporters, that the amount of this financial activity is so vast and so complex that it's hard to follow, as they put it. None of us could follow it. What is your own sense of how much you and the team at the New York Times have been able to follow? Do you think you can see at this point the basic shape and size of the entirety of it, or do you feel you're at the tip of an iceberg or the middle of an iceberg, or what does it feel like?
It is overwhelming, and it's required adding more and more people to spend, just in really a global operation to try to dig into this. And I think, for the last year and a half, we have been amazed at just the reach of these efforts to make money by the family that overlap directly with the authority of the president and his actions, and the cryptocurrency and the predictions markets and critical minerals and defense spending and drone spending. All of these things are businesses that the Trump sons are now in, or that the president himself is benefiting from directly financially. But it was still pretty incredible to see the totals. I mean, we all knew that he was making a great deal of money on these business operations, but I just didn't imagine just a $1.4 billion from crypto, because particularly given that we know that most of the people that bought that meme coin, almost, the largest share of them, they lost billions of dollars by following him. He enticed them to bet on him and his meme coin. When most meme coins are such speculative platforms, they almost always, they rise and they fall. And there are hundreds of thousands of people that followed his suggestion, and that they're losers. They lost money, and he walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars from their losses. And it's just sort of astounding to think that this happened involving the president of the United States.
Eric Lipton, we cannot thank you enough for this reporting. I think we have a sense of how difficult it is, and thank you very much for staying with it. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, with the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence upon us, Professor Eddie Glaude's new book is titled America, USA, How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries. Professor Glaude will join us next. Last night, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Isabel Wilkerson, whose most recent book, titled Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents, was quoted by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson in her opinion on birthright citizenship, and she said this.
I just find it so fitting that the Supreme Court, for all of its mysteries, reaffirmed birthright citizenship, the foundation of what it means to be an American. And, to do this on the eve of the 250th anniversary of the United States, I think is extremely meaningful. It reinforces the language that she was using also, which was this idea of the second founding, which was the remaking of the country through the Reconstruction Amendments. After essentially the Civil War practically broke the country apart. So what it does is it calls upon us to recognize that, unlike the old country where from which we declared independence, we are a nation of people from all over the world, and we, together made a country that had never existed before. And so the idea of this being reaffirmed on the eve of the 250th anniversary feels like it's a full circle recognition, particularly with all that we've been through as a nation in the last, in recent times. This seems like a fitting moment for this to have happened.
Princeton professor Eddie Glaude Jr. seems to have anticipated all of this in his new book, America, USA: How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries. He writes, with every anniversary of the nation's founding, the divided soul of America, this idea of the country as a beacon of freedom and a white republic, is experienced in convulsions around race that threaten to tear the country apart. American anniversaries are often moments to turn a blind eye to the evils of the past and the present, to suppress the fact of America's divided soul. And joining us now is Eddie S. Glaude Jr., Distinguished University Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University and an MS Now political analyst. His new book, America, USA: How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries, is available in your bookstores and online now. Professor Glaude, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And your title says it all, and here we are. Here we are on the eve of one of these big anniversaries, and race returns to the subject.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Lawrence. We are in that moment where, the contradictions at the heart of the country are in full view. And one has to ask the question: what will we be celebrating come to July 4th? Will we be reaching for that storybook version of the country that secures our innocence and virtue in order to turn a blind eye to the ugliness of our current days? Or will we, in so many ways, try to tell ourselves a story that reveals our shortcomings such that we can actually imagine how we're going to get to the other side of this madness? As I was listening to Isabel Wilkerson last night, I was thinking about, the history that informs and shapes, right, the context of the assault on the Reconstruction Amendments. I was thinking about the slaughterhouse cases. I was thinking about the USA versus Cruikshank. I was thinking about the civil rights cases of 1883, the very ways in which the 14th Amendment was under assault almost immediately afterwards, and the context that led to not the end of Reconstruction, but its murder, and what happened in that period, and how that in so many ways shapes and informs the birthright decision arguments that we're grappling with in 2026.
I think it's possible that the person most quoted in more than just the Chief Justice's opinion, but Justice Jackson's, Justice Thomas, was Frederick Douglass, who in your book, you quote his famous July 4th oration where he said, "The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your forefathers is shared by you, not by me. This 4th July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn." That voice was very present in this decision this week.
Yeah, and in American USA, I try to pull that voice into our current moment. What does it mean for us to celebrate July 4th and the gutting of the Voting Rights Act? What does it mean that Associated Press is reporting tonight that ICE has arrested over the end of June, 10,000 people, disappearing them into these detention centers. What do we do with the end of TPS, the redrawing of districts in the South? Here we are. You know, Douglas said that America was full of the apostles of forgetfulness. Right? Those folk who would disremember. He said the country was destitute of political memory. And in that July 5th speech, Lawrence, he gave a warning to the nation, even as he embraced our special mission. He said that we had to remove the serpent coiled in the bosom of the nation. And in some ways, he was saying that's the only way we could release ourselves into a different way of being in the world. One has to ask the question, since he's being invoked in the 250th year of the country, whether or not we listened.
Professor Eddie Glaude, thank you very much for joining our coverage tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up, we'll consider how Donald Trump's disastrous handling of the reflecting pool on the National Mall reflects his disastrous handling of his war in Iran. That's next. Donald Trump was thrilled to make this announcement last week. 6 people have been arrested and 7 people have been cited for the damage they did to our country's now beautiful reflecting pool. Good luck finding a Washington, D.C. jury who will convict them of that Trump accusation. And Donald Trump's newfound worry comes long after he pardoned the worst vandals in Washington history. The thousands of Trump supporters on January 6th trying to overturn the presidential election in a conspiracy against the United States of America for which Donald Trump was indicted by Jack Smith. The real vandal of the reflecting pool on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. is, of course, Donald Trump himself. On May 7th, Donald Trump's motorcade actually drove into the empty reflecting pool after it was painted and sealed and before it was refilled with water. And the weight of those vehicles surely did serious damage to the integrity of the bottom of the reflecting pool. How profoundly stupid do you have to be to drive a car on the bottom of a pool? And how lazy do you have to be that you couldn't walk? The New York Times reported at the time that an expert, quote, said he was also concerned by Mr. Trump's decision to drive his motorcade across the pool's surface. That might have put huge amounts of weight on the notoriously leaky and newly repaired joints between its concrete slabs. If it were my project, I'd require an immediate inspection, Mr. Arhan said. Donald Trump has reached the point of his presidency where it is obvious to anyone that he cannot get anything right, from war with Iran to getting clean water in a pool, something millions of swimming pool owners in America are enjoying right now at their homes because they are better at pool maintenance than Donald Trump, or Donald Trump and his no-bid contractor. In a New York Times podcast hosted by Daniel Woykin, columnist Tom Friedman draws a connection between Donald Trump's reflecting pool failure and Donald Trump's failure in Iran.
There is a parallel between Trump's failure to clean up the Persian Gulf and his failure to clean up the reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial. And because both, to me, are failures of a commander-in-chief, because both were done in their own way through no-bid contracts. And no-bid contracts, which don't allow any other bidders than the one the president anoints, always get you in trouble. So in the case of the reflecting pool, we know that the National Park Service bypassed competitive bidding and gave the $1.7 million contract to a firm called Greenwater Services, which happened to be run, shock, are you sitting down, Dan, by a Trump campaign donor. What happened? Instead of turning the reflecting pool blue, as the way Trump wanted for the 4th of July, it's turned into a algae of green blooms that have basically wrecked the whole scene. Now, why do I compare that no-bid contract with the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran? because in a way, Trump approached it too in a kind of no-bid fashion. Let's go back to the reporting of our colleagues Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan from the key decision-making in the Situation Room at the White House. Trump invited in Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. He was in the Situation Room. It was a no-bid moment where Netanyahu then brings onto the screen the head of the Mossad, and the Mossad tells Trump that through aerial bombing, they can decapitate the regime and trigger a popular uprising in Iran. And of course, none of that happened. Trump didn't even have in the room his energy secretary, his treasury secretary, and his own experts. The director of the CIA called the Israeli idea farcical, and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, called it. But Trump went with his gut, with his no-bid contract with Bibi Netanyahu, and the result has been the Strait of Hormuz has been turned from blue into green, red, and white, the colors of the Iranian flag. No-bid contracts get you in trouble, whether they're in the mall or in the Gulf.
Pulitzer Prize winner David Fahrenthold, New York Times investigative reporter who broke the news about the no-bid contract for the Reflecting Pool, reported Katie Martin, the spokeswoman for the Interior Department, said that the department had not been aware of the political affiliation when it awarded the contract. This company was selected because they had the expertise, workforce, and materials needed to complete the job in time, she said. Ms. Martin and a White House spokeswoman both said the White House was not involved in the selection of this company. Katie Martin works for a president who was recorded telling over 30,000 lies in his first 4 years in the White House. The Trump regime has refused to reveal exactly who decided to give the contract to the for the Reflecting Pool to this guy, who has given Donald Trump $350,000 in campaign contributions since 2016. We'll be right back. That is tonight's last word.